Hello, hello. Hey.
Hey everyone.
And I think it's working.
Yep. I see us on the YouTubes. So we got 11 people on the stream. Let's wait like a minute before we start. There are already 3 dislikes before we even started. I can only attribute that to material team being scared of a new UI kit. So,
Well. Um,
So let me start by saying who we are and what Taiga UI is. Me and Roman, we work at the internal UI kit team in Tinkoff. It's our world's largest fully online bank. We've been doing this for like 3 years, and we built it to a point where we felt comfortable releasing it to the public and making an open source project out of it. Our designers created a separate theme, so it looks different than to our proprietary products. And we finally managed to release it very late in December. We had a little release party where we showed everything and explained the demo portal, answered questions, what we're gonna do now too. But it was on Twitch, and this time we're on YouTube. So the recording will be there, and if anybody has questions or would like to rewatch it, it would be possible for them. So do you want to add anything?
I think nothing. So we have, I see 6 people
Yep,
or more.
something like that.
Okay.
So let's share the screen with the demo portal, and we will just go over it.
Alright.
And feel free to type your questions to the chat. I will be reading them between our show and tell sessions. So the screen is shared. It's a simple landing page, and with the browse components button you could open the actual demo where you can see all the components and directives and helpful utils. So what do we have there? First, there's a get and start guide where you have a few steps to get started with the library, what you need to do. The library is broken into separate packages and some add-ons. So there are 4 main packages. These are the CDK, core, kit, and icons. Those are built on top of each other. So the CDK is the lowest level package where you have a lot of abstractions, helpful tools, low-level directives, services, some things that you could use to build your own UI kit if you'd like. It doesn't have any design in it, just the functionality, so you can create your own stuff based on this. It's a little bit like Material CDK. And the second package is core. This is where the design comes in. There's some global styles and the theme for the components, and some basic components like primitive text field, which all our inputs are built upon, the drop-down menu, and some of other low-level components. And the kit is the meat of the library. In kit package there are a lot of components. There are more than 100 overall. There are data pickers, there are selects, combo boxes, multi-selects, multiple choices. So there's a lot of things over there. We could go over the list if you'd like. And the icon package is somewhat based on feather icons, and some icons were made by our designers. The icons can be switched to a different package. We don't yet have the customization section on the demo portal, but we will add it hopefully this week with instructions on how to change the appearance of components, switch icons and things like that. So let me check the chat if there are messages there. Okay, I see that people are excited to see this demo, and I see that Mladen agreed with his team to try Taiga in a new project, so that's good to hear.
And we have 16 people. Cool. Hey everyone.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, if you have questions on how to implement some things, so we have a section in Angular Discord. I'll send an invite link to the chat.
Yeah, and I can show it right here. There are a lot of ideas, questions, and some interesting discussions about Taiga.
I hope you see the link in the chat now. It's an official Angular Discord community. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff there. There are sections for different libraries, discussions, some meetups and conferences, I guess too. So feel free to join. And there's a section on Taiga. I believe the link I sent would lead you directly to the Taiga UI section. So I see there's a question there. So the question is, why can't we go with the material? Why do we need Taiga UI? You absolutely can go with material and any other established library. We started working on Taiga UI 3 years ago in Angular 4. There were no material CDK by then, and it was really hard to build something that is tailored to your needs. So it was a good choice for us to create a dedicated team to build something that does exactly what we needed to do. And with time, we developed some patterns and skills that allow us to make very customizable components that would be able to handle a lot of corner cases, a lot of special cases, and we decided that it is more than just what we need. It basically can replace material or any other library like that. We have a lot of components. Some of them material is missing. I believe they only added date picker last version. Of course, there are like ngZoro and other open source libraries as well. So it depends on what you're comfortable with. Just to clarify, we didn't really look into source code of material or other libraries too much. It's mostly our own creation. And we had some things we changed along the way, so it's not like a fresh product that is a rookie in the business. We've been working on it for 3 years, so there's a lot of experience there, and all of our products use it for that time. So there's a lot of projects that test if everything works fine. So there are a lot of integration tests and screenshot tests and manual testing as well. So this is something you could depend on. I mean, it's like a trusted code that was tested. So for me, material is a little bit bulky. It has a lot of flags and custom cases that are handled not in a universal way. So to me, it just feels like the API is better. So I guess it's opinion based. So you can try, you can give it a shot. Are those 4 first packages required? Not really. You can use just the CDK, like I said, and build your own components. You could use core with its helpful stuff. So if you want to use Kit, then you'd have to add the CDK and core because they are incremental. And there are also separate add-on packages, add-on mobile, add-on commerce with input cards and currency formats. That's a pretty good one. So Roman will show you. It's an input card. It has 3 components for expiration day, for the CVC, and for card number. It has a Loon algorithm validator for card number. So these add-ons are completely optional. That's why they're called add-ons. They are focused around some subject like charts, for example. We have line charts, pie charts, and a ring chart. I think this could have more components coming up when we need them. So this is mostly based on what our products had in the business need, but there's quite a lot of. And the cool thing about the whole library is it's fully tree shakeable. It uses secondary entry points to the maximum. There's some cool technique that Roman came up with, where each deeper secondary entry point is a primary entry point for the components
For
there.
the level above.
Yeah, for the level above. So I think there's an article explaining this. I can send a link to the chat if you haven't read it. So the thing is that every piece of code is very isolated, like you see on the screen. Material has secondary entry points and other libraries have them too, but in our case you can import everything directly from the main entry point and it would still be tree shakeable. Nothing will get into your bundle if you don't use it. This is also a good solution to test for circle dependencies because it would just not compile if there is any. So you could just have some simple directive or utility function from our library and you would not get your bundle increased. That's a pretty cool thing. So let me send a link to the article. I already released a second article about Taiga UI explaining the drop downs and dialogues and portal pattern that we use. It explains why we need the root component that you could see in the getting started steps. So if you want, you could give it a read. I'll post the links there.
I've sent it.
Oh, sure. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. So I see that Roman sent an article on the introduction and the second one coming soon. Second one is about root
I
component.
can show it on the screen. Demystifying Taiga UI.
Yeah, I've sent the link. So this is like the basic introduction to what is the whole package. If you have questions, let us know, and we can go over the demo portal to show you around what you have there. So there's a documentation section where you have the getting started guide, the browser support. It supports Internet Explorer 11 now if you follow some separate instructions on enabling the CSS custom properties polyfill, but it's most likely that we will drop the Internet Explorer support because our company is dropping it at the moment. So right now everything works, but I don't think we will test it in Internet Explorer soon going forward. There's a changelog section where you could see all the changes that happened. This library starts with 2.0 version because this is how we went to the open source. The 1. Something is closed source versions, and we had some 1.6 or something like that intermediate releases that we were testing the CI, the GitHub infrastructure and things like that. So basically you need to start using the second version, 2. Something. And we are yet to establish the release cycle. In our company we had 1 week bug fix, and the second week was the feature release. Right now we are in transitional state, so we haven't yet established that, and don't really have the fully designed plan on big features coming up. One big feature is interactive table that we will start working on. We need it in our products, and this is something we want to invest time in the coming weeks. And I hope to create some sort of roadmap later on, so you could see what's coming. This whole demo portal is made with our little library that is also open source. It's called add-on doc. You could use it to create your own demo portals like that to showcase your APIs or components that you're working on. It's like a very lightweight alternative to Storybook with a lot less features, but it's sufficient for what we need, and maybe it's good for you too. And there's a friendly library section. As you maybe have heard, we were working on open source for a while now. Actually, tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of a common package from Web APIs for Angular. It's what we were working on with Roman and some other people who contributed from the community. It's a series of libraries to consume native APIs in Angular way with observables and declarative code. It has tokens for global objects, so you don't access them, and this way with tokens you are prepared for server-side rendering or Ionic and things like that, where you don't have them. It's easy to mock in tests. There's even a sister package for Universal for server-side rendering, and common packages included with Taiga UI, as well as Intersection Observer. Maybe a few of those libraries are included with Taiga UI because they are used by our directives. Yeah, and some of them are just for you to check out if you need. I think they might be helpful for you. Especially some observer libraries, web workers, and things like that. So there are also links to our other projects that some of them also included in Taiga UI. It's let me see the list. So it's NG Polymorphios. It's the first thing that came out from our library as an open source branch. We developed this pattern of generic content for components. Where you don't care if you pass the template, a dynamic component, or string, or even a function with context. So this is a really helpful technique to make your components visually generic, that can accept any templates in any form. I wrote an article about that when we released it. I'll send the link to the chat. This is really cool stuff. I cannot imagine working on Angular projects without it already, so you should check it out. It's included in Taiga UI, and it's the basis for our components customization. This is why you can have any template you want for combo boxes, dialogues, and things like that. Very helpful thing. And the second one in the list is ng event plugins. It is a little tiny library. Most of our libraries are like 1 kilobyte, very small. It adds a few plugins to events in Angular. Like you probably know that Angular has some pseudo events for key presses, like key down enter or key down arrow up, where you only listen to particular keys. This is achieved through event plugins that are built in Angular, and we've made a few of our own. You can see them on the screen. Basically, they allow you to add a few modifiers to events. .stop to stop propagation of event in a declarative way, so you don't have to pass event to the handler and call it imperatively. There's also prevent for prevent default, like an example above, where you want to prevent mouse down so the focus doesn't leave input, for example. There's a cool thing called the capture. It listens to events in capture phase. I believe it was not possible in Angular before in any reasonable way, just only the manual event listeners or from event of RxJS. And there's also a silent modifier. It is used so you could run handler without triggering the change detection cycle. Very helpful for particularly sensitive events like scroll, mouse move, touch move, things like that. So these are built in Taiga, and they are enabled with a root module. So if you use Taiga UI, you can use these modifiers in your code as well. There's no need to do anything. This also has an article explaining how it's done. So I'll send both links in chat now, so you can check them out later on. So this is a first link that explains the concept of ng polymorphius library, and the second one is about event plugins and how you can create your own if you ever need one. I see Web MIDI API, that looks cool. Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. If you have a synthesizer or like a electro piano, you could connect it to your PC, and Chrome natively supports it, so you could play it. There's a demo which doesn't work if you don't have MIDI. I mean, you could use a mouse to try, but it's not that cool. And we have a little game that Roman is showing off right now. It's called Jamigo Up. It's a synthwave karaoke game with like a Guitar Hero mode where you play on the synthesizer if you have one, or if you don't, you can use your regular keyboard or touch if you're using a mobile device. I'll send the link there so you can check it out. It's pretty cool. See the question: does Taiga UI work with disabled ng zone patches like animation frame, or even without ng zone at all? I haven't tried it, but we use all the best practices of Angular, working with change detection. So if Angular works with that, then we also work with that too. We don't really have some tricks up our sleeves on how to disable it, or we don't try to sneak out of ng zone where we don't need that. So I'm not really sure. There shouldn't be anything that blocks it, so should be working. But we have
to optimize.
Yeah, we have an interesting tool for RxJS where you could optimize streams so they run outside of ng zone. We use it a lot to optimize the library. So basically there are two operators. One is called ng zone free and the other one is ng zone full. One leaves the zone and the other one returns to it. So you could have a stream of like some particular events that happen quickly or often, and you can add zone free so the whole stream goes outside of ng zone.
There is an example with animation frame stream, for example. So we have animation frame stream and these two zone free operator that you can also use on your apps, importing it from our CDK.
Yes, and if you want to re-enter the zone later on, if you your stream passes some kind of filter that you need, then you could use a second operator to zone full, or just use the combined one, zone optimized. That's what we usually do. You could put it after some distinct until changed or some filter, and then you will not have change detection triggered unnecessarily. This is we posted it in Twitter as Angular tip. A lot of our tips that I think got us the followers that are watching us now, they're all based on what we've been working on here, and a lot of them are part of Taiga UI. We will probably revisit some of the best tips and explain how to do it with Taiga functions, but that's later.
Yes, it's included in the CDK, and you can use it without our UI part, without core or Git libraries, just importing from CDK.
Like I said before, it's all tree shakeable, so you could import those small functions from the CDK and use them. There's also one very handy decorator called TuiPure. It is used to skip extra calculations. So you could use it on getters or on the methods, and when you use it on getters.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on.
There were no picture of my screen, unfortunately.
Yeah, Roman was showing it, and
now you can see it. For example, there are our.
I see it on the screen. Maybe there's just a delay. Right?
No, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what you're showing right now.
Okay. So Yeah, here you can see our 2-zone optimized and 2-zone free operators. You can use it in your streams. This way, for example, there are some stream with some events, and you just use 2-zone optimized operator with your NG zone, and as you can import it from Taiga UI CDK to use it in your apps. Well, and
yes, and we were going to show the pure decorator.
With
So you could use it on getters or on methods, and in case of getters, it's like a delayed calculation pattern where you only compute something computable only when you need it. If it doesn't change, then you could use it on the getter, and it would be replaced with a property after the first calculation. So it's cool to create some streams or to check for some values that you don't need immediately, but that will not change later on. And the most helpful way to use it is with methods. It turns your methods into sort of a pure pipe. You know that in Angular you have pure pipes that will not be recalculated if the arguments are the same. So it works like that on methods. It checks for the arguments, and if they are the same as the previous call, it would just return the same result without calling the function itself. So with our love for declarative code, it's a really helpful tool to not create manual states that you have to manage yourself with ng on changes or things like that. You could just use methods and getters and optimize them so you don't run extra calculations each change detection cycle. So this is also one thing that I cannot imagine working in Angular without. This is something that I would probably use in every application I'm going to make. So let's see what else do we have on our demo portal.
all right. So
I see Philip liked the declarative code article. Thanks. I think it's my best one as well. It sums up a lot of what I love about Angular and how to write code that is a pleasure to write and to support. So I'm really glad I've managed to write this one. So what else do we have there? We have a common section that goes over some styles like global classes for text and CSS variables for colors that you can change if you create your custom theme. Like I said, we will add a customization section to the demo portal explaining how you can create your own theme and customize the library. It has icons here and some styles summary of some mix scenes we have. We use less, but if you use SAS, then Taiga UI is perfectly compatible with your project. You just need to add global styles to your Angular JSON, and Angular will do the rest. You will not be able to use the mix scenes, but I don't think it's that important. The components all would work just fine. The next section is components. This is the meat of the library. We have some basic components like accordion, badges, tags, some links and buttons, and as well some more complex ones like input date time that got a lot of excitement from people. Apparently not very many libraries have it.
We have many inputs.
Yeah, we have many different input components.
Input date time, right? Yeah.
input data, for example. You can import your date and your time.
Yes, and our components are very modular, so this is like a generic input with some masking and host for the dropdown, and the dropdown is calendar, which is a separate component by itself. So you can always create some interesting things on your own with the basic components that we have. Can you show the calendar section? I believe there's an example there.
All right.
So there's a calendar on its own without the drop down. You could use a calendar range for picking a range. You can have 3 in a row. You can have some markers for the events in the calendar. You could use it in a drop down for some button or things like that. So it's everything here is usually sticks together seamlessly with some getters and a few functions. It's really easy to combine different components because they're very isolated. So if you have some particular need for some really smart thing, like maybe some navigation or particular sidebar with dashboard like inputs, graphics and things like that, you can always combine basic components pretty easily. If we don't have a specific component for that, most likely you can create your own.
Yeah, there is a good example for in input date range. We have 2 calendars to select date range, but I can also put some items with ranges, and now I have a list of items with some ranges, and I can select, for example, current week and get it in my calendar. Oh.
Yeah, there's a question about calendar and mobile devices. So by default, it just uses regular calendar. So open input date. Yeah, and let's emulate the mobile phone so we can see a small screen, but do not refresh the page yet. So right now, this is just a basic calendar. Click it. You see it fits on the screen pretty well. But if you want to create a more native experience, in our package add-on mobile, there's a mobile calendar module. If you include it, then you will have this full screen dialogue-like calendar that appears on screen, and it looks different on Android and on iOS to to better emulate the native experience. So if you refresh the page with iPhone emulation, you will see the design a little bit different. So this is what we have in our mobile package. The package itself is not very big yet. We used it for some PWA-like applications, some hybrids, things that emulate mobile apps. But we plan to make more things in that package. So you could use some directives from it to emulate native behavior on iOS and the ripples that we all know from Android apps with the ripple directive. So it's a classic ripple. You see, you could color it differently. And there's also the mobile calendar that we saw earlier, and there's sidebar that you see here. It's not in the demo yet. I need to add the page for it, but you can see it in action. If you open the demo portal on a small screen, you would have a sidebar appearing for the menu. I see that people like the calendar, the mobile version. Thank you. It was actually written with some custom virtual scroll strategy for Angular Material CDK with the virtual scroll for the month, so you could scroll it all the way. Pretty cool to explore it. It was pretty cool to explore. And thank you for warm words regarding our product. Yeah, there's quite a lot of things there, and not everything is documented yet. A lot of low-level directives or some components that are not used very often are missing from the demo portal. We'll probably need to review it and add everything that's there. So there's another question I see. So the question is, since Angular already respects design patterns and solid principles, how much are used from your side while you are writing libraries contrary to writing features? So I'm not really sure what you mean by that. It's been a while since I worked on a product. Hold on. Yeah, sidebar is there. So we use dependency injection heavily to make everything work as it should, depending on the context. And we also use generics a lot, so our components are they don't really care what data model you're using, because they operate with generics, and you could pass some handlers to take care of things, like to check if item is disabled, or to match if user input matches your object for suggestions, for example. And like I said, we use ng polymorphous everywhere we can to customize the appearance. So our components really don't care about how they look and don't care about what they work with. And you, as the end user, can provide any visual interpretation of your objects as you want. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. If you can maybe elaborate a little bit on it.
Well.
Yeah, we will work with tokens a lot. Right now, Roman is working on internationalization, so you could change it on the fly. We would use tokens and observables, so we could use some localization tools that you have, like Transloco, I think, should work with. So there was a question about model with a custom component. So this is an interesting thing. We have abstract service, so you could use it to create your own dialogues with any custom design you have. And we also have a built-in dialogue design that you just saw on the screen, as well as mobile alerts imitation that looks like mobile alert, native ones from Android and iOS. It's pretty easy to create your own dialogues. All the job, like focus traps and raising up the dialogue itself, is done through the built-in features in abstract class. The basic idea is you create a service, it extends our abstract class, you pass on the default options that you want to have, and the overall model for options. And when you call this service, it creates an observable. When you subscribe to that observable, it opens the dialog. If you unsubscribe, it closes the dialog. So this is how you work with them in a reactive way. I think Roman is showing on the screen. And like everything else, it supports polymorphous as content, so you could pass a custom component that you created, the dynamic component. You can pass templates or even strings. And if you want to create your own dialog, you would need to create a component, the wrapping component that would be responsible for overall look, like border radius, the size, shadow, and things like that. And it would get the context through dependency injection. It would be an object with all the options that you passed to the service, and it would also have the observer that you could use to close the dialog from within, calling complete on it, or you could use it to pass data back with the next method. So I think it's covered in the article I've sent, but if you have any questions, you can let us know in some way, like on Twitter or in GitHub discussions or on Discord. I think there should be maybe a little bit of examples on how to create your custom dialogues. Maybe it's not that clear. We will see. Maybe I will add it to the customization section that I'm working on. So Duarte wants to see side navigation menu example. Actually, there's no sidebar example on the demo portal, like I think I mentioned. You could only check out the source code at the moment, but we will sure add the page for sidebar directive, and we will create some navigation example there. So stay tuned. Come back later. So in material, you could use a component as a parameter for open function of the dialog. Here it's almost the same, except you would need to wrap your component with a polymorphous component class. Can you find an example here? Yeah, like that.
All right.
You need to do that because we use generic solution, and as you know, your class is indifferent from a function, so you can't really tell if it's a function or a constructor at the runtime. So we need to I need a way to determine if it's a function or if it's a component. This is why you wrap it with a class, so we could check the instance of internally. And also you can pass the injector there, so your component can have access to some DI tokens from the place where you define it. So we could use inject them in constructor. It was also required for dynamic components pre-Ivy, where you had to add them to entry components, if you remember that. And this way you could pass the injector that knows about them. But since Ivy release, I think it works without it. So injector is there to pass some data. And what's cool about polymorphous, contrary to dynamic components, is that you could pass context and inject it in constructor. I think it's not built in. You can pass injector to component outlet, but you have to create it your own manually, and with our code you can just pass an object as a context, very similar to how you would pass it to ng template with ng template outlet, and the same works with dialogues. So in terms of accessibility, how do you see Taiga UI? It's fully accessible through keyboard, and it should work fine with screen readers. But I think there could be some area attributes added, and some of that improved. I don't really have much experience with accessibility, so I've made it together with Roman to the best of our knowledge. So if you have you see some issues or you see something is missing, feel free to create an issue. We would be glad to add it. Accessibility is the subject that we want to explore more, and we think that is very important. So like I said, it's accessible with keyboard fully on all components, but if you have some experience with that, or some experience as a user with disabilities, and you see something missing, absolutely go ahead and create an issue so we'd add it.
There is a good example of this. I can come into our input with a keyboard, and it shows a hint after 1 second. It's content to let reader read it. For example, if I do it with my mouse, there is nothing, because I can use mouse. That's why I can take a look at our hint with mouse.
Yes, and you can make your own hints accessible if you bind them with a focusable component through a directive. Then, for example, now you can use a mouse to hover and would show the hint, and if you link them with the same ID with the area attribute described by, then you could have it show with a keyboard focus. This is a pretty cool thing. Not sure if hints are accessible in other frameworks like that. The question for style for components: is ngDeep required as with material?
Nope.
Yeah, not really. If you want to customize the look of components, then you can do that with our components use the TUI wrapper component inside to display different visual states like hovered, pressed, or disabled. I will add a page describing how you can customize it, customize the way buttons, inputs, checkboxes look, and you can also change icons with a different icon set. But the instructions are not yet available for you. I hope to add them this week, so I will sure post it on Twitter when it's done, and there will be a comprehensive guide on how to change the theme.
Yeah, but if you need some small changes, like for example some colors palette, fonts, or maybe radiuses of buttons, you can change it on the fly with CSS custom properties. So I can set, for example, and show it with DevTools. It's easier, and you can just customize all our components and the whole team of our library.
That's right. All the
without any
CSS variables are available for colors in the color section, and things like border radius and fonts, they will be on that customization guide I'm working on, because there's more to that. You can. Our components also have a dark theme. Most of them. We don't yet have a global overall dark theme that you can toggle with one click, but we have a directive. You can see it. Yeah, it's mode. I think you just need to open some input or something like that so people can see.
Right.
Yeah, for all the components, you have a API tab where you could toggle all the API inputs and see how they work. And on top there, you see the TUI mod section where you could disable mode or use on dark and on light mode. It changes appearance of components. So the on dark is probably the most relevant. It can be used to create a dark mode for your application. And this is all working with a DI, so you can just create a one TUI mode directive on the very top of your application. Every component would listen to it. We plan to create a dark mode overall that would substitute the CSS variables, so you don't have to adjust it manually with all the background and font text for your application. And components already have some styles for the dark mode.
Yeah. There is also a small theming page where you can see an example with material design and bootstrap.
Yeah, it's just a little fun page.
Made with the wrapper that Alexander said.
Yes, so this is like a very small page. We will make a big one explaining everything that is there. There's a question in chat. I would like to contribute to Taiga UI. Is it possible? Yes, that's absolutely possible. Roman, do you want to talk about it?
The first thing, there is a section in our README on GitHub with a link to contributing MD. So there is nothing very interesting, because you just need to run npm CI and npm start. Npm start will launch a demo portal, the same thing that you see at Taiga UI Dev website. So you can change make some changes or fix some our bugs and contribute it. But nevertheless, it would be cool if you write to us. For example, we can discuss some changes that you want to make, and maybe we can just share our ideas, or I don't know, approve your design or
yeah. So first
something.
you need to create an issue if it's not there already, so we could discuss the solution to it. And if there is something in the issues list that you want to work on, just let us know. Write a comment there that you try to take that on. You can fork the library, create your changes, and then create a pull request, and we will see if there's something need to be changed or if it's good to go.
Yeah, anyway, it's a very cool idea, and
Yeah, I think we have already a
Um,
few contributions.
alright.
Yeah, if we
have,
take a look at the contributors.
7
yeah.
contribution.
So
Some people.
apart from us, there are 5 people who made some contribution, like
Mhm.
maybe at least one, maybe some typo fix in the documentation. That's also fine, and maybe some bug fix.
Yeah, feel free to join.
So a question: have you tried mixing Taiga with Tailwind in your apps? Any plans to support Tailwind in some way, like Taiga inheriting config from Tailwind setup? We haven't tried it, and I haven't really worked with Tailwind, so I can't tell you much about it. But to you as the end user, Taiga components are just DOM elements, and if you want to use Tailwind for layout, it should work without any problems. If there are some particular use case that you have troubles with, feel free to create an issue or discussion, and we will try to figure it out. So that's my answer. So there are no more questions at the moment. If you have more, please let us know, and let's go back to the portal and see what's there. So we were going over the components. There are calendars that we show. There are charts in a separate package. There are some checkboxes, radio buttons, things like that. There's a color picker, pretty interesting component. So it's like an input color, but with custom color picker. You could use it to pick any color. You can color the button with it like that. You can also create gradients with it if you pick it from the top. It's also a good example of how modular the thing is. Basically, you can create a separate color picker without the input color, and you can also just use the 2D plane where you pick the coordinates and things like that. So I think it's a good example of what we have here. So then there are drop downs. We have a few of them.
For example, hosted dropdown.
Yeah, hosted dropdown is basically your way to create some custom dropdowns. You wrap it around some focusable element like a button or input, and you pass the content for the dropdown. It could be template, string, or dynamic component like usual with Polymorpheus, and it would take all the focus code for you. So you could use keyboard to navigate it. And the second component that you see here is dot list. It is somewhat similar to native dot list. It has opt groups which you can use with some name or just a nameless separator. And it has 2 option components, which could be a link or it could be a button. For example, the link is used in our search on the navigation on the left, so you could click it and navigate to the page. Or buttons can be used for inputting value into control, like they are in select or combo boxes, or they could be a menu for some button with context menu. There are even sub menus there. Do you have it here? Yeah, so it's pretty cool. You can combine it to any depth you want. And all our components have some examples. The API tab with inputs they have and outputs, and a small tab with setup of what module you need to import and how you could add it to the template. So it should be clear to at least try. And if you have some difficulties there and feel like some documentation should at some places should explain more, then let us know. We will try to add that. Then we have a lot of inputs. As you see on the left, the input inline, it's a popular pattern of inline editing, like for titles in Jira tickets or things like that. There are input for dates, date ranges. There's input file, which you could use to upload something. It shows the progress, shows issues with uploading, things like that, depending on how you configure it. There's input password, input number. There are sliders with input range, input slider that you could also use to enter some number values. There's multi-select and input tag, which you can use to enter an array of items. Input tag is used for strings, and multi-select can be used for objects of any type.
There is a new question about
Mhm.
select component, so we can show it. and
Select.
Explain.
If you're talking about just the select, not the ComboBox, it's not that difficult because you cannot enter any value there, so it's just basically a drop down. If you use ComboBox, then it's a bit more complex. So how do we approach it? We have a generic text field. We have a hosted drop down that is used to wrap it around to attach some drop down to it. We have a data list component, and we connect them with some dependency injection so they know about each other. The drop downs are rendered in a portal above everything else, so you will not see any z-index issues or overflow hidden issues. You can check the portals article I've linked. And there's some keyboard navigation things, and that's basically it. There's not much there. By default, the ComboBox does not filter anything for you, so you need to do that. Basically, there's a search two-way binding for the string that is entered in the text field, and you could use it to filter the items in the result that you are showing. You could set them up manually with everything you want. So you could change some templates, you could maybe put some items as options, and in between them some buttons that could do something else. I think there's an example
There is no example
in
with
select
ComboBox,
maybe.
but there is.
Yeah, with text area above.
Alright. I think something about
Item delegate. Go up. This.
Alright.
So you could add a button that does not relate to the control itself, but it performs some additional action, like in this case it adds a new field. So this is pretty interesting task. Roman have some extension that shows icons there, so it's not that green button there, it's not in Taiga, it's an extension that checks spelling. So I think we had a little masterclass explaining how we built our components, but I think it's in Russian, right? There's an article on declarative code that was mentioned in the chat, where we built a very simple ComboBox with very little code. Of course, it's very basic, so it's not the way it's built to the production, but it gives you a perspective on how we approach this. We try to use as little imperative state management as possible, and I'm not talking about state of the application, I'm talking about the state of the component. So we try not to watch out for things changing in energy on change. We try to express the component declaratively, just basically laying out how it works without dependency on the order of execution. That's a basic difference between declarative and imperative programming. You could try watching the source codes for those components. I think they should be very pretty clear, because the logic is separated into different components, and the select itself is rather small. If you have some question about some concrete example, then feel free to ask, I'll answer it. Would it be a good UX to add a spacebar to toggle drop down to the select component? So I think in select component we do that, like the native select does, but in ComboBox, where space is input for text, then it just doesn't open it, because I mean, when you type something into ComboBox, it opens anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And in select, it's optional. I believe native select opens the drop down, so it's okay in my opinion. The bad UX about drop downs that I sometimes see is that they are open when you focus them. So when you're moving with the keyboard, it's not really intuitive for it to open immediately. So that's what you should try not to do. But I see it sometimes. So let's see, what else do we have? We have a line clamp, which is basically overflow ellipsis for multi-line text. It uses CSS whenever possible, or JavaScript to fall back to, and shows the full text in hint when you hover it. There are some smaller components that we probably should not focus on. There's notifications. Yeah, so this is a notification component, and in the services section you have a notifications service to show the toasts on screen. Let's go there. It's very similar to dialogues in the way it works. It's also a service where you call show, right? The single method show, and returns you an observable which you subscribe to. It also can send data back if needed, and you can use components, templates, strings, like usual with everything in Taiga. And there are simple options to change the color and add auto close or just manual close. So at the moment it opens with down arrow. That's a logical thing to do from the keyboard. So you say that R select does not open on space. Maybe it doesn't, so we could implement that if you see that as an issue.
Alright, it doesn't. It works with arrow down, and that's all. Fair enough.
You can create an issue on the GitHub so we don't forget about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what else do we have? The multi-select.
Multi-select works with space.
Because it's an input. You start typing text and it shows you the suggestion. So ComboBox opens with space. It's just the select. You can also have a data list added to basic input and to some other inputs like input time or input phone. It works the same way as with other components. You could check the template examples for it. So you add a data list. And in some components like input time, you can just pass items as input because they work with particular type of items, which is TUI time. So you cannot really use any generic data there. So let's see what else do we have in the list. Custom scroll bar, SVG component, which is a universal way to show icons. It can be used to show icons by name, which works with built-in icons or icons that you process specifically. I will add the guide on those with customization guide as well, how to change icons. You can pass the source code for SVG element, and you can use just a link to the SVG icon and would download it and inline, so we could change the color with CSS. There's hint, and that's all for components, I guess. There's a lot of smaller ones that we didn't look at because they're rather simple. There's a navigation section which has breadcrumbs, navigation with pagination, stepper, which could be horizontal and vertical, and tabs, which is an interesting component. It can emulate native tabs on Android and iOS, like you see. It detects the browser with dependency injection tokens, so it works automatically if you pass token to mobile aware, so it would try to emulate the look of native tabs. And there's also tab with more component, which is used to hide extra tabs in a drop-down. It can hide a particular number of them, and if they do not fit on screen, on resize or things like that, it would automatically hide them to the drop-down. So what else do we have? Then we have decorators. I already talked about the pure decorator, and there's also an interesting one called default prop. You could use it to pass a particular function to assert if the input is correct. For example, if we have an input for component that is called quantity, for example, then quantity cannot be negative, but the type is number, and even not a number or negative number or maybe some floating point number would be okay from the TypeScript perspective. But for us as a developer, this is an invalid input, and it would be good to know if somehow not a number got into a component or a negative one, so we could figure out that somewhere in our logic there's an issue. And you could use that decorator on input to pass a checking function. If the checking assertion function fails, you would see a message in console, but only in developer mode, so you don't see that in production. And we used it a lot. We actually use a lot of assertions in our code. It's a little bit of programming by the contract. So our utility functions will print assertions in console if you pass some wrong values, like if you try to quantify the number by some negative number, things like that. So we are very, very far from Lodash in that term. So Lodash would try to figure out what you tried to pass. So it would, if you pass null and try to round it, it would probably result with 0, because it would assume null as a 0. We do not do any type conversions, and we always try to flag some potential issues in logic as early as possible with those assertions. And everything here is made with strict TypeScript config, so no nulls or undefines or some things like that. And also every component uses on push, so it's very strict in terms of development. So there's a question: how feature rich is your table component? I've said some time ago that we will start working on a big table component maybe next week. So it's something that we would add in the coming month. We don't really have much now. We just have the resizable columns and some pagination components that are not yet combined in a super table component. But it would be there because we need it in our own projects as well. So keep an eye on that. I will be posting updates and maybe articles explaining how we do things. So you can subscribe to our Twitters and see all the updates there.
Well, we have 13 likes. Thank you.
How many
And
people are there?
no more dislikes.
Right.
And
So there
are 15 people.
15 people, right? So next section on the demo is directives. There's a lot of helpful things there. Some complex one like active zone. It tracks where user working with. It watches for focus changes and mouse downs. So this is what we use to close the drop downs when user clicks away. And you can also use that for some logic that you have. You can have child zones, parent zones. You can have them separated in the DOM. You can have one in portal and one on page as regular. So this is a pretty helpful tool. There are smaller directives like autofocus. the drop down, the low level directive drop down is there. You can use it, but it's probably much easier for you to use the hosted drop down component that I talked about. Here's one from add-on mobile. It's an interesting thing. It's a common pattern on mobile devices where the header is shrinking when you scroll, so it takes less space. This directive is kind of like sticky. It emits a value of how much of the component would be visible if it wasn't scrolled away, and you can adjust the font size or transform to incorporate that. There's a highlight directive which shows you text that you enter on page. It's only working with text notes, so don't expect it to look through whole page. There's a lazy loading directive for images. It shows a skeleton for the image, the animated gray one, until it loads. It uses native lazy loading whenever possible, and if not, it falls back to intersection observer, so you could use that for older browsers too. There are some hints, like the menu hint that is triggered with a boolean input instead of mouse hovering. There's a pointer hint, the one that follows the cursor. There's a let directive, very helpful one. It's a lot like ngIf, but it has no logic there to show or hide the template. And instead it is used just to declare the result of a sync pipe, for example. So you could use it with falsy values like null or 0 is an often example, and still show the content, because with ngIf, if you would async pipe number stream and it has a 0 in it, you would not see the template. So that's a helpful thing. There's a media directive to work with audio and video elements in declarative fashion. You could pass on current time, volume, things like that. So you could create your custom video player, which is very, very simple with that directive. Just a few inputs there. There are ripple and detachable directives that were already shown for mobile imitation. There's a validator directive. It's a pretty interesting one. It allows you to change validators on the fly with the declarative directive, even on reactive forms. So if you have some validation that is dependent on something else in your interface, then you could use it. It's a helpful thing. Then there's a few pipes. There's a filter pipe, a mapper pipe, and some formatting ones. So filter one is a very helpful tool to it's not that filter. Yeah, filter pipe.
We have a filter
Yeah.
component and filter pipe, but in filter,
So it's
in
a
pipe
routing issue.
section we
Yeah.
have. Yeah, alright.
I think they both link to the same
Yeah,
page. Yeah, I mean, they just
unfortunately,
named the same, so it's a routing issue. I need to fix
But
that.
it works.
Yeah, let's go to the mapper pipe. It's pretty much the same. So as you know, in ng4, in Angular 1, I think you could filter the array, and in Angular 2, they used to have that maybe, and then removed, and wrote in the documentation that it was a performance issue why they removed it, when in reality what they needed to do is to make that that pipe pure, so it does not recalculate if the array stayed the same. This would stop mutations from working, but you should not really mutate anyway, and we have that filter pipe pure, so we pass an array and then a function that is filtering the pure function, and then it does not recalculate on change detection cycles. Helpful one. Or you can use the pure decorator that I mentioned before. There's a scroll service. It's a simple one to smoothly scroll to some position in browsers that do not support it natively. And there are a lot of helpful utils for some math, formatting, DOM manipulations, and things like that. Not sure if you really need them, but there's a wiki page on those in our GitHub as well. Not everything is there yet, but most of them come from the CDK package, and they're pretty simple, but it's, things that we need often, and separated them into utility functions. So I believe that's pretty much all I wanted to show. Is there anything else you want to add, Roman?
I think you showed it, but maybe you have some more questions about Taiga, about our repository organization or something like that. Please write it down. And we also have a StackBlitz starter. You can find it in how to start section of our README.
Yeah, it's helpful if you want to show us some issue.
Yeah.
To reproduce it.
Or just try to play with Taiga UI. If you don't want to install it in your app, you actually can reproduce any your examples here without problems, because we already solved it. Well, do you have?
If anybody has any more questions, throw them in the chat. We will wait for like 1 minute or something, and then call it a day. Would you recommend to purge Taiga styles? What do you mean by that? If you're talking about some global styles that we have, they consist of simple normalized CSS and global classes for spaces, lists, tables, and things like that. They are probably optional. We need to check that and maybe make them explicitly optional if you don't want to use them.
This question is about removing unused CSS after a build, but anyway, it should be done by ng compiler.
I'm not sure if it does that.
If some CSS classes, if you don't use some CSS classes, I think it shouldn't be included in your bundle, but I haven't researched this. Insert where you can default bugs unless.
Yeah, that's a question about pluralized pipe. It's actually made for Russian text, and if you use it for if you use pluralize for any other text, I think you should use one in Angular. The Angular has a built-in one that works with all the locales, so it's better to use that. I'm not sure if we will keep our version. Maybe we would migrate it to the Angular built-in one, but it really is only made to work with Russian. So. I'm glad you liked it. Thanks for coming. Yeah, you could try it. I think there's a page about it on the Angular IO. So they added the native pluralize from version 6, I think, maybe 7, not sure.
Looks really cool, congrats. Thank you.
So thank you guys for coming. It was really nice talking to you, answering questions. Stay tuned. Watch for our updates. We will be posting them regularly and write some articles and things like that explaining features we have and how we came to make them, what advanced stuff we use here and there. Should be helpful, I think. So thanks for coming.
And you can also click subscribe button. We'll try to find some ways to make an interesting content about Angular, for example. There will be maybe some live coding sessions
yes,
of
definitely.
some interesting components that we are going to do soon, but maybe we'll make some videos about Angular tutors
Yeah.
or
And don't forget to
lessons.
leave a star on the GitHub.
So yeah, you can contact us in
Yeah,
Twitter
through
or
Twitter or GitHub or any other contacts you
example.
find for us. So thanks for coming. Bye
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.